Finance and Property Committee on Tuesday, November 5th at 4:30 in the conference chambers. And we'll begin by going around and introducing ourselves. Dean?
Dean Veneman, Alderperson.
Jay Bemke, District 8, sitting in for Thad Kubishak.
Shane Blazer, Mayor.
Kyle Kearns, Director of Community Development. Brandon Jacoby.
Jamie White.
Okay, who's online that could introduce themselves?
I'm Ray Humford, District Alderman.
Ask him if he's subbing for.
This is Angel Whitehead, President for the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce.
Jeff Kuhn, Finance Director, Wisconsin Rapids Water and Light.
Okay. Tom, are you still interested in being on our committee tonight?
I wasn't going to be.
Okay, then Dean will be on the committee.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else we're missing? What about Mr. Zerflu? No, I mean. Oh, okay. So we'll begin tonight, and we're going to switch the order. Number 4, to review and consider the approval for an ordinance which would authorize the Water and Light Commission to place delinquent electric bills at as specific charges on the property tax roll. Mike, did you want to speak to that right at the beginning?
Yeah, I very much appreciate you guys changing the order. I've only got about 2 minutes. I'll try to make it as quick
Could
as
you
possible.
Could you speak louder?
I've only got about 2 minutes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Let me try something different here.
it's better.
Second.
Try it now, Mike.
Try now.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I've only got about a minute or two. I appreciate you guys changing the order. I did forward a copy of a little spreadsheet that I made to Steve Poth. I don't know if he forwarded it to you guys, and I think Dean Rams, I don't know if Dean's on the meeting, has it too. Basically what I did was I received information from Water and Light from Lynn and Jeff, and you guys have that spreadsheet?
We do not.
Well, basically, in the year 2015, I'm going to round these numbers, there was about 92,000 of accounts 90 days past due. In 2016, 87,000. In 2017, 72,000. In 2018, 79,000. And in 2019, 78,000. If you took this amounts, divided by 12 months, divided by 14 customers, it averages about 49 cents a month per customer. This does not take into effect any money Water and Light would collect from the customer if they paid later. It does also not take into effect any money Water and Light would get from their ability to collect from the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. I don't know what those figures are. I'd be happy to serve on a committee with Water and Light and another landlord or two to get these numbers better. My guess is, and this is a guess, I don't like the assumptions. I think everybody knows what that breaks down to. And that being said, though, the high side would be 49 cents a month per customer. My guess is it'd be less than 25 cents a month per customer, which I don't believe any customer is going to recognize 25 cents, let alone 49 cents. I understand that 2020 is a year that we all want to forget, that has an extreme amount for Water and Light because of the coronavirus, but I don't think any of us anticipate having this happen in the future. With that, I only have about another minute. If you guys have any questions, again, I appreciate you taking me out of order. Thank you very much.
Before there's questions, I forgot to ask you to state your address and if you live in Wisconsin Rapids.
Okay, my name is Mike Zerflu. My address is 2610 Ridgewood Trail, Wisconsin, Rapids, Wisconsin, 54494. That's actually in the town of Grand Rapids, but we do have city water there, and we are a water and light customer, and I do own numerous properties in the city of Wisconsin Rapids.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? No, apparently there's no questions, but I haven't received your chart, so I really don't
I
have
can
any.
try to email that to you if you want tomorrow. I apologize. I'm pretty sure we emailed it to Steve. I would have thought he would have forwarded it, but I'm not positive. That might be my error, and I do apologize.
Yeah, so it's hard to come up with questions of something we haven't seen, but I appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much for taking my call.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So is there someone in the audience that would like to speak on this topic? And then you come to the mic, I put the mic on, and just state your name, address, and if you live in Wisconsin Rapids or not. Okay.
I'm Brandon Jacoby, and I actually live in Nakusa. I want to thank the committee for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I've been investing in our local community now for about 26 years. I actually started landlording when I was 20, and I currently own about 26 homes here in Nakusa, Wisconsin Rapids, and Port Edwards. I'm also a small business owner. I own Jacoby Custom Cues in Nakusa, and I can attest to the effects of COVID. Before March, I was on pace to have a record year. And after the shutdown, I lost about 30% of my business. At that point, prior to the shutdown, I employed 25 people full-time at the shop. Now I had to reduce my staff back to 17 just to adjust to the current environment, the change in my business. Now with the changes to landlording, there's a moratorium on evictions right now. So I currently have 2 tenants who are behind on rent, and I work really hard to help them stay caught up, because I know from experience that once they get so far behind, it's not a positive outcome for them or for me. So I've worked hard to do that. Now I face the possibility that this ordinance could affect my landlording career as far as like how I just generally conduct business. I like to think about some of the things my dad always tells me. He always gives me these little tidbits, and he always says, Brandon, he says, you should check to make sure the river's got water in it before you jump off the bridge, right? And I think that's a really valid argument for this situation. I don't think anyone in this room can take a look and forecast and say, what's the end of 2021 going to bring? What's the beginning of 2022 going to bring? This ordinance is a long-term answer for a short-term problem. This, from my understanding, is a budgetary issue today, not at the end of 2021, not at the beginning of 2022. So I think it's important that we look for solutions that we can use now, today, to solve the problem that we face today. Are there other things that Waterworks and Light can do to collect on their accounts? I would have to think that for Waterworks and Light, it's really not much different for myself. If my tenants get 2 months behind, the probability that they're going to catch up or have a positive outcome, decreases. Is that the same for Waterworks and Light? If they have their customer who gets delinquent, and now with this circumstance, now they're behind 12 months, is that going to be a positive outcome for them either? So looking to try and collect that money now, so that by the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, that they're not a year's worth or longer behind in electric utilities. Using the TRIP program, there's always been a lot of talk about TRIP, the tax return to intercept program. Can that be used now to collect active accounts? Why does it have to wait until someone's delinquent? If someone's behind 7 months, it's not doing them a service by allowing that to go until 2021 before we try and collect that money. I think we should look at our toolbox, find the tools that we have in our toolbox right now to fix the problem that we're facing now, not at the end of 2021. So I'd like for everyone to think about that, because once we jump off this bridge, This isn't going back. This isn't like in 2023, we're going to say, oh, well, I think everything worked out great. Let's change this ordinance. Once this ordinance is in place, that's it. Like, this is going to be, it's not coming back. So I appreciate you allowing me the time to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Jamie? Your name and address, please.
My name is Jamie White, and my address is 3410 Deer Road, Wisconsin Rapids. I'm also in the town of Grand Rapids, and my husband and I own 5 rental properties in the city of Wisconsin Rapids. And so, similar to Brandon, we both have full-time jobs, and we're doing landlording, you could say, on the side. But it is something that I have an interest in with this. We're a part of the Wisconsin Rapids Area Apartment Association, and there are 28 members, and there were quite a few here the first night that this kind of came to council, and now it's coming back to committee. And there were many that had an interest, but we just, as an organization, thought that Brandon and I could, just basically say, hey, what can we do to help? How can we have this discussion? And instead of everyone being here tonight, that was kind of the general consensus. Now, with Waterworks and Lighting, my understanding is that there are about 82 landlords in Rapids, and so our organization only represents about 28 of them. And like I had mentioned at council, it does sound like about a third of the customers for Waterworks and Lighting is landlord or investor-based properties. And I'm getting these numbers from Water and Light, so if they're different than that, I apologize. And then of the past due amounts, about 70% of it did seem to be, customers that wouldn't own the property. So if the bill from someone, I come from the position that I'd like to see the people that turn the lights on be responsible for paying. And in this case, if this was to go into effect, potentially 70% of the past due would be going to the person that wasn't responsible. So, if hypothetically this could just go to property owners that were responsible for creating the bill, then in some ways it's kind of a no-brainer. Let's just put it on the property taxes if that, makes it them pay their bill. But this would have a huge impact on the people that invest in the community. And from the perspective that we really don't have any say in, like Water and Light likes to say, that they don't have any say in what tenants go in the property. And for the most part, we're all trying to get paying tenants, and we're trying to do our due diligence in, figuring out who we're going to be able to rent to. We are limited, by some of the restrictions and making sure that we're considering everybody, but we don't have choice in who we sign up for. Like if I sign up a property that's in the Alliant or WPS district, we don't deal with the utility bills at all. They don't come back on the landlord ever. So in the situation where we have property that we own in Rapids, currently the water and sewer bills are already coming back on the landlords if they don't pay their bill. If you look at, I did look over the Waterworks and Lighting budget, and it looks, to be a fairly well-run company. And if you look at the water past due, they anticipate for next year's budget 0 collections, like 0 past due. And that's obviously because the landlord is paying it. Kevin and I have changed how we do things to make sure that our tenants' bills are paid for water and sewer. And so when I started doing research on this and talking to Water and Light, I really, really firmly believe that there is definitely more that could be done in terms of collections and in terms of outreach. Jeff had mentioned here the other night that they stopped calling in July. And I do collections every day. We have storage customers that don't want to pay their bills. And so just for fun, I did a lot more calling recently just to kind of see what's the general consensus. And just yesterday, I probably called 40 or 50 people that were past due. And of the calls that I was able to get answers to, the people said, oh, I'll pay that on Friday. I get paid on Friday. I'll pay that on Friday. And then I spoke with someone else that used to be in a position where she couldn't afford to pay her bills. And she said, whoever called me is the one that got paid. And she said it was just, whoever called me when I had the money, that's the person that got paid. And so when I looked at this request by Water and Light, I would really, I have given Scott a copy of my request, and basically I opposed the Waterworks and Lighting ordinance change request. And I think that it's important to consider that some accounts haven't been disconnected and are past due since November of 2019 because of the disconnection regulations that they're under, and in addition, now COVID. So this would put a huge hardship on property owners to have, I can't even imagine some of the bills that are out there right now. And I think that when I found out about trip collections, I made the assumption that Water and Light was doing that with all customers. I found it's only terminated accounts. So anybody that still has an account has not been put through the trip program. And then again, as landlords, we don't have the option in the future, once COVID is over and once things hopefully go back to some form of normal. As landlords, we don't have the ability to disconnect their power. So they can use whatever power they want, and the only person that has that ability to disconnect is Water and Light. So I would also, as Mike said, be happy to be a part of the process for helping with the collections process. I don't think that municipalities, as a rule, do a lot of outreach in terms of, when they decide to stop calling in July. That's not going to help the bills. And at this point, I'd like to see that we work on the collections first before implementing something of this magnitude. Thank you.
Jay, here's a question here.
One of the landlords, I have just a couple questions, and I didn't do my homework this afternoon, I'm sorry, but isn't there rent, you said you had a couple renters that were behind right now. Isn't there rent assistance available, and is there some sort of utility assistance available? And if there is, do you work with your tenants on these things?
Of course I do. Yep. So,
Why don't you come to the mic?
sorry. Yep. So one tenant that I have sent them when COVID first hit, there was additional money that went to CAP services. And I pushed the tenants then to go to CAP services to get assistance. And even with still getting that assistance, she still has chosen not to then continue to pay rent. So then it puts me, with the moratorium then where I really can't post the 5-day eviction notice because she's not paying me because of COVID. So then I just am constantly calling her, texting her to continue to make payments, even if it's $20 here, $50 here, just to maintain. So, but there was initially money for assistance. And then with CAP services, then that's always been there where if you had a tenant and you gave them an eviction notice that they could go to CAP services. But I do believe it only covered 1 month's rent, and it was based on their ability to continue to pay rent as well. But
What about the utilities? Is there anything available for utility bills?
okay, so not that I'm aware of. So right now, with the couple that I'm dealing with, I have one tenant. I only see the water portion of it, and she's behind $555 just on her water portion. I don't see the electric side of it, and that actually ends up being a Alliant in that particular case. So I wouldn't see that because it's not it's a private utility. So it's a different rules. But so as far as knowing if I could have a tenant who has a past due electric bill, that I could push them to some assistance, I'm not aware of.
Okay, thank you.
That.
When I spoke with Lynn, this is Jamie White again, from Waterworks and Lighting, she had indicated that there is some type of a program, and I think that's something that as a landlord association, we need to be a little bit more educated on. I think there was some basic information, but sometimes unless you hear it, you don't really understand how the program works, or unless somebody says, hey, I already did this, it works. So at this point, I can't say that I have any experience using it, but I was told that there is some.
Thank you.
Any questions? Anyone else in the audience that has a comment or question? Okay, Jeff, you're on the phone. Do you have any questions or comments or reflection on what the speakers have said? Jeff Kuhn?
The only thing I would say is the county does have energy assistance, kind of like Jamie was mentioning. They have the ability to do an annual benefit plus crisis funding when that amount is needed.
Mayor?
Hey, Jeff, this is Shane. Can you, we talk about what Water and Light does and doesn't do. Can you maybe explain what Water and Light does to try to collect past bills
Sure.
or the process?
Prior to 2020, the utility's strongest collection tool is disconnecting service for non-payment. If we look back at 2019, we sent out thousands of calls and notices to all of our past due customers, performed just around 1,000 service disconnects to urge payment. However, in 2020, when the PSC kind of forbade utilities from disconnecting for non-payment due to the current pandemic, when we lost that collection tool, the past due receivables nearly doubled when we take a look at where they are at the end of October compared to where they were in 2019. As of October 28th, the utility is holding about $1 million of total past due accounts receivables. It was about 65% that was attributed to landlord properties at the end of October. I guess, you know, as we're talking here, the discussion before the council is to, you know, determine if you're going to allow the utility to tax roll past due electric balances, not necessarily review the business practices of the utility. The council appoints the Water and Light commissioners to oversee the operation of the utility. We are very stringently regulated by the Public Service Commission. The PSC doesn't allow the utility to unilaterally collect a deposit from all renters or commercial customers. We do need to provide service, even if the applicant refuses to provide a social security number or driver's license number. And kind of one of the things that can be an issue sometimes, you know, the utility is not party to the landlord's lease. So if a customer comes in and requests service in their name at a certain property, we're statutorily required to provide them service. I know Lynn's worked with the Landlord Association a number of times. You know, some of the recommendations we've recommended is, you know, landlord can collect and hold an additional utility deposit. They can require the landlord to be current on their utilities as a requirement of the lease, and even require utility service to be placed in the tenant's name as part of the lease agreement. And I guess, you know, just another comment, if the utility was given the approval to tax roll electric, we would still continue to attempt to collect past due accounts from all of our customers. We're just looking at, as an additional tool, would be the tax roll process. I think as we talked at the council meeting, the amount of past due, the timeline in which that amount would be collected could be 2 years out before that money would actually be received by the utility. If that person disconnected service today, that would go on the tax roll in 2021 and then be looking at 2022 for potential collection. So the other collection tools that we have in a normal year definitely are better in terms of cash flow and in terms of ability to get payment from a customer. And I guess just one final thing, you know, we were looking internally at the past due amounts. The PSC typically operates under the pretext that cost causer pays for the costs that they create. Unfortunately, if the revenues aren't collected, the additional amounts are going to be socialized to all residential customers. Depending on the past due amounts of 2021 and how long the PSC would allow the utility to recover those costs, our estimates are that residential customers would likely pay an additional $2 to $5 a month. And as a utility, we take pride in keeping our costs low. We've consistently been in the bottom third of electric rates in the state. With an additional increase like that, that's something we wouldn't be able to maintain. Thank you.
Any other questions? Tom, do you have any questions? or comment?
No, I don't. I'm just listening intently here.
Okay.
Question. I thought at the last committee meeting, can Jeff just clarify if he can disconnect water right now? Because I thought at the last meeting, he said that they could still disconnect water. So could you just clarify that?
I'm going to have another question for you, too.
Okay.
Jeff, can you disconnect water?
We cannot disconnect water. The Public Service Commission at their last meeting put a moratorium on water disconnects up until April 15th of 2021.
So basically, one question, a comment I want to make, if this passes to go back to the Common Council, and if it passes the Common Council, it doesn't preclude Lynn in Water and Light to work closely with the landlords and different options they might have. Because I think over the last couple of years, Lynn has been working well with the landlords and coming up with some solutions, but so if it's passed, it doesn't mean that there isn't that discussion that they have to offer some ideas. But the Water and Light is short over $1 million, so, or close to. And that's really a concern. So I guess that's a comment, just general comment I want to make. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Jeff?
If you don't mind, one of the landlords, Jeff rattled through a handful of things there. One of them was a utility security deposit for the landlords. Do you know, is that a common practice within your group, or do you do it?
So just to talk about the practices that I use. What's that?
Is the mic on? Is it green light?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can talk about my practices as far as when it relates to water and sewer. So when I rent a property, I do retain a security deposit. And when a tenant moves out, part of my process is I call Waterworks and Lighting, I get a final meter reading on the meter reading, and then I will deduct from the security deposit, and then I'll pay for their unpaid water bill, right? But the problem that most landlords come into play is not every situation is like that. Not every time when a tenant leaves is this the situation where their security deposit is enough to cover the water bill as well. If I go through an eviction and I am already, because normally if someone contacts me about rent, being late with rent, I always work with my renters. You know, I want to provide a good quality home for them to live. And if they call me up and they say, hey, Brandon, I can't pay rent today on the 1st, I got to pay on the 15th. I say, no problem, just pay me on the 15th, right? But sometimes then they start to get behind. And then usually once they get to the 2-month behind, then that's when I push harder then for them to get caught up. But if then they decide to still continue to not pay, usually then typically that tenant then has already then damaged the property, owes me for rent, hasn't paid their water bill or is delinquent in the water bill. So then their security deposit would never cover that. So then in addition to that then, you know, if water was, or I'm sorry, if electric was put to it, I haven't adjusted my business practices at all to adjust for that. The possibility that someone could go, you know, 12 plus months and not pay electric, and then all of a sudden, I mean, I can't go back and necessarily recollect security deposits on that electric bill. You know what I mean? So, because I already have business practices in place now for the situation now. So.
I guess my question is specifically is, I understand you have a security deposit, but do you do, if I understood Jeff correctly, you can specifically do a utility security deposit, and do you know of anybody that does that? If that, is that right, Jeff?
Jeff, are you still?
Correct, yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Right, and you can add into your security deposit whatever someone's willing to pay. Usually I've found that the security deposit, I'm using that as a portion to pay their unpaid water bills. Like, so when it usually comes to the end of the year, you know, I try and make sure that I'm not having a lot with the possibility of going to, even if I would collect that deposit, if I get to that point where I've went through that eviction process, even if it was $100 more, still would never, because usually it's thousands of dollars of damage or lost rent plus all these things together. So it's like a big portion. And I think that's where, it really comes into play for landlords, is when you get the person who's not paying me, they're not paying Waterworks and Light, they're not paying their electric bill, they're not paying everything, right? So.
Jamie?
So, Jay, I can speak to that a little bit too. I would say that it's probably not common practice to have an additional security deposit. Right now, I think often most people that are renting, and I guess I don't want to just tell everyone's finances, and make assumptions like Mike said, but most of the time, first month's rent and just a security deposit is about maxing out. So we don't usually ask for much more. I mean, we're not really in a position right now with everybody's finances to say, ask for more than that. Usually that's sometimes a struggle even to get both of those up front. And then, Scott, you had mentioned about passing this potentially and then having Waterworks and Lighting work with the landlords, and that really scares me. It makes me think of the nuisance ordinance that got passed. When we worked with the police department there, they had some things that needed to be put in place, and they said, well, we need to pass this first and then we'll put that stuff in place, and that stuff was never put in place. They still don't notify me as a landlord when something's going on at our property, and yet I'm still responsible now because there's a new ordinance already in place. And so that really concerns me. I think there's plenty of time here for this to go back, to Waterworks and Lighting. When I talked to Jeff and Lynn, I heard basically we need to hear this from someone else because we think our collections are fine. And when I talked to the commissioner, one of the commissioners said that in the past, the collections were fine. So if that's true, then why is this even being presented? If it's a one-year issue, I think all of us are in COVID-19 together. I don't think it's just, Waterworks and Lighting that's the only one that's affected by this. So I'd like to see that this not be passed, and then they'll work with us, because they won't have any reason to work with us unless the council, and I know Jeff mentioned that the council basically doesn't have any say over their business practices, but right now landlords' business practices are also being talked about at the same level as Waterworks and Lighting, and Waterworks and Lighting is owned by the city. It is municipally owned. So when I talk to the commissioners, their interests aren't always in collections. They want whoever's hired, like Jeff or Lynn, to take care of those processes, and I get that. But when it's being asked to be put on the tax roll, then I think we do have an interest in how the collections are being done. And I'd like to see that not be passed, and then hope that they're going to work with us, because past experiences, it doesn't work that way.
Jeff, I was just curious, of the past due, we're talking about landlords, but what's the number, maybe you don't know off the top of your head, of the people that are past due that aren't landlords and just basic property?
Yeah, I mean, I know dollar-wise, of that $1 million that was past due as the end of October, it would have been about, 650,000 roughly was landlord properties, and the other 350,000 was non-landlord properties. Now that's all types of service. That's water, electric, and sewer, and that's all classes of service from residential to commercial.
Okay, I was just curious. If you could say your name and address, please.
Yeah. Danielle Hanker. I actually live in Appleton, but I work here in the city. I'm just going to kind of read something that my brother Patrick, who owns some properties with him, he said that We Energies does not apply past due balances to the tax bill. Every individual, when they establish service, must provide their social security number. We're wondering why can't Waterworks do that. When the tenant leaves the property with an unpaid bill, that bill follows the tenant to the next property that they rent. And when they try to establish service with their social security number, the past bills are noted and collection is attempted prior to establishing that new service. This is a model that we believe that Waterworks and Lighting could and should implement as well. Additionally, in any business transaction, the seller is obligated to collect from the buyer. In this particular transaction, Waterwork, as the seller, is attempting to force payment upon us landlords, which are a third party, that we were not the party to the original agreement between the seller and the buyer, which would be the tenant. Assigning that obligation of payment to the property owner is only valid for owner-occupied properties, and they're using their own service. In non-owner-occupied properties, the burden of payment must follow the buyer, the tenant, and the collection should be shouldered by the seller, which is WWLC, and not the third party, which is a landlord. Another point, if the Waterworks is city-owned, why are just a few of us taking the fall when, for instance, Home Depot, Walmart, any of those companies, they actually put into place something that covers for any loss? Waterworks and Lighting could do the same thing, use the money that they have to cover some of that loss. And yes, maybe the taxpayers, the city taxpayers, would have to pay additional per month to cover some of those losses. But I don't think it's fair to be put onto the landlords just because, the tenants are not paying their bill. And we just are hoping that, you could work with us here because we're the ones trying to supply the residents of Wisconsin Rapids, try to supply housing for them. Just help us out and let's try to work through a viable solution first before we go ahead with this proposition.
Any other questions, or? Mayor?
I guess a little bit further off what she said, and I think Jeff already spoke that they cannot collect Social Security numbers. They don't get to operate the same way as a private business. And I believe they also have, and Jeff can correct me, they have a cap on their return. So we're a private business like Alliant and everybody else. They don't have a cap on what they can make for profit, where Water and Light does have a cap. So that cap's supposed to be used to maintain the infrastructure and replacing and rebuilding the system. And I don't know if there's room in there extra to allow for covering delinquent bills.
Do you want to comment on that, Jeff, or?
Sure. When we go through a rate case, they come up with a test year of your revenue and expenditures, and they create your rates to cover your test year expenditures. And we're set with a small rate of return to, like the mayor said, to reinvest in the infrastructure of the utility above and beyond your depreciation rate that you have. So that rate is a lot lower than an Alliant or a corporation that may not have those limits at all. So our limit is pretty low as far as what we can collect. And just kind of one aside, the electric tax roll process, as defined under Wisconsin Statute 66.0809, is only available to municipal utilities. So it wouldn't be available to any of the investor-owned utilities. It's required to do for water, but the statute leaves it up to the municipality to pass an ordinance to do so. And the last numbers I saw, I believe, about 78 out of 82 of the municipalities in the state have the ability to tax roll electric.
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion? Mayor?
I guess also, Steve called me today, and Steve Koth, and he's apologetic that he could not make the meeting. He was concerned. He wanted me to highlight trying to find opportunities to find a common ground, something in the middle. He also reiterated to me that, he wouldn't be in favor of, doing something hastily. If we talk about it at another meeting or if it was held over, he's not opposed to that either. Just for your information.
I'll make a motion, we can decide on our vote, I guess. I'll make a motion to consider approval of an ordinance which would authorize the Water and Light Commission to place delinquent electric billing as a special charge on a property tax roll.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
2 in favor and 1 against. Okay, thank you. Okay, going back to our agenda, number 1. This doesn't need consideration, but a special event and street closure application was from the heart of Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce for a rekindle of the Spirit event on Wednesday, November 25th, 2020. And Jennifer mentioned that doesn't need any approval, so. Number 3, consider for approval the application of the U.S. Economic Development Administration CARES Act grant.
Thank you. So this is in
Kyle,
regards.
could you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, this is Kyle Kearns. I'm the director of the Community Development Department for the City of Wisconsin Rapids. This item is before you because the city, along with several other partners, including the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce, the WEDC, and most importantly, the Regional Plan Commission, have been working to apply for an EDA grant through the CARES Act to get some dollars to construct or hire a consultant to eventually construct a plan in regards to the Verso Mill as well as the area surrounding the mill. This plan is somewhat outlined in a draft project scope that was handed out at the meeting. In addition, there's a resolution that was provided prior to the meeting and I also handed out earlier. Essentially, there's as part of the project scope, if the EDA grant is awarded, the consultant that eventually would be hired would do a market analysis in and around the area of the mill. There would be a visioning portion of the project, site redevelopment, strategies outlined, and then implementation. And this isn't solely just to focus on the mill property, but just as much as the areas around the mill and the connections between the trucking routes and the businesses and the residential neighborhoods that border the mill property. And this, the primary reason for this is to take advantage of those CARES Act dollars, but also set up the city in the event that the kind of the worst case scenario happens with the mill and we don't find a buyer and it either sits vacant for some time or is salvaged. We want to take a proactive approach to planning, and this is one way to do that. Part of the grant is described in the resolution. Ultimately, the EDA will fund up to 80% of the total project costs, meaning that a 20% match has to be provided. At this point, the WEDC has worked with us, and it's a little bit complicated, but essentially the WEDC has said they will try to provide the 20% match. But in order to do that, a nonprofit economic development agency, in this case, which would be the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce, has to apply for the WEDC Capacity Building Grant, and that application was just completed today. Angel is on the call today and can answer any questions regarding that. But the hope is that the city would not have to fund any of this. That ultimately what would happen is the EDA, if given the dollars, would provide 80%, and then the WEDC would match that with 20%. And as you can see from the narrative, the total project cost is estimated at $180,000, meaning that the 20% match would be $36,000 that the WEDC would cover. We're hopeful to get this application out into the EDA by the third week of November after council approval, but we're hoping to get a finalized application this week and hopefully get some additional letters of support into next week and then submit the application. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions you guys have or provide more details.
Angel, do you have any questions or comments? Angel?
Hey, everyone. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, we're really excited to be partnering with the city and then the other organizations on this project. We did submit the first draft of the WEDC grant request today on behalf of our part of Wisconsin Community Incubator organization that's within our chamber. So we're really excited to be able to have something that's tangible for the future if redevelopment needs to happen within that spacing. So the Heart of Wisconsin is committed to, my staff time is committed to this project specifically, along with others at my office as well.
I think it's just great to look into it. Good idea. Any other comments, questions, or motion?
I'll make a motion to move that forward.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? No nays. Thanks. Okay,
No, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to make sure, Kyle, just in case I forget to remind that we should put the resolution as separate action on the beginning of the council agenda on the 17th, because the actual motion or the agenda item doesn't include the resolution.
Correct.
So we want to make sure that we include that. So
Certainly.
in case I forget, please.
I will make a note of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay, now we have the audit of the bills from Bill 5827 to 6173. Any questions about the audit of the bills? Is there a motion?
Move to accept.
Second.
There's a motion to accept and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No nays. Okay, discuss the option for the 2021 tax collection and preliminary discussion of converting to 2 tax collection and installment in the future years.
Sure. This is really a two-part discussion here. The first part is that, kind of based on what we're going through, obviously, with the COVID-19, I'm requesting that the December 31st and January 31st installments, that we do not do in-person tax collections. What we would do is that for people that want to drop off their tax bills or tax payments, I should say, at City Hall, we'd have a drop box. We would process those and then send those people a receipt, because normally people that want to come up and pay in person always like to get that receipt, and that's always provided to them. That we would just have a drop box, we'd process that, and then we would send the receipt to them, and they don't have to include a self-addressed stamped envelope. That would be the city's cost. Mostly because up on third floor, if you haven't noticed, there's not a lot of room. We get a lot of people up there at times. There's not a lot of social distancing. It doesn't afford for social distancing up there. Plus, obviously, with the amount of traffic we see up there, the limited staff we have, actually, mid-January we'll be down 1 person. Just we can't afford anyone being quarantined or anything like that. We'll be doing some kind of some backup planning and training some other personnel in City Hall to help with tax collection if we do get a quarantine situation with our present staff. But I would just like to request that for at least for the December and January installment, that we do not do in person up on third floor tax collections. Like I said, they can drop this payment off, put it in the mail, they'll get the receipt, but
So the-
obviously with what's going on, I just think it's a prudent measure.
So the drop box would be in the front lobby?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Kind of like what we did, if you remember, in the April installment, it was kind of the same, because I do believe City Hall was shut down at that point. We provided a drop box. And so I would just, because, I don't know exactly, looking ahead, but I'd like to have advance notice so that in the tax bill insert, we can notify people and inform people that this is what our practice will be, at least for the first installment. April and the July installment, obviously, it'll kind of be a case-by-case basis, see what the situation is at that time.
Okay. Any questions or concerns about that?
And the other two is that, I know over the past years, currently the city has 3 tax installments, one being January 31st, one April 30th, and one July 31st. And we're kind of unique. There are other communities that do that, but we're kind of unique in having 3 installments. I just want to know if there's any interest in all of that, just, going to 2 installments, and that would be January 31st and July 31st. And the benefit to the city is that once the January 31st installment is over or done, then the tax collections would be turned over to the county, and then we wouldn't have to collect the April or July installment. The drawback of that is obviously we lose a little bit of investment earnings for the second and third installment because we collect that money for both not only the city, but the other taxing jurisdictions. We're able to invest that. But then we have the cost of, temporary personnel to collect that. And before I kind of put any work or preliminary analysis together to determine the pros and cons of doing that, I just want to know if it's kind of off the table from the council standpoint. I mean, I understand spreading out a tax bill over 3 installments. Sometimes it, is more beneficial than 2 because obviously the January 31st installment would be a little bit less under 3 installments, a little bit more under 2 installments. And so I'm just wondering if there's a lot of opposition to going to 2 installments. I'm not going to be heartbroken if we do it. I'm just wondering if, before I put kind of the effort into putting the analysis together to make a informed decision, if there's really any strong opposition to going to 2 installments.
Mayor?
Tim, roughly how many people make full payment in first installment? And we're the only one in the county that does 3 installments?
Yeah, that's correct. And I would say about, after the January installment, about 60% of our tax levy or the tax roll is collected after the January installment. So most people are paying that full amount up front. Obviously, on your January installment, you have your tax bill, which is divided in 3, and then any special assessments or special charges are included on the first installment. So, and like I said, I'm not looking for any decision tonight. I just want to know if this is kind of one of those things where going to 2 installments is off the table. I won't pursue it any further, but I'll be, if there's some interest, I'll be happy to put the numbers together and bring it back at early next year.
Okay. Jamie?
Do I need to state my name again?
No.
Okay. So I'm not sure if anyone else is in the position that my husband and I were in, but when we first started investing in real estate, we could barely make the 3 separate payments. Now, that might not be the same situation, but just after listening, obviously, to the first motion that was passed that I'm not happy about, and now to this question, I think my question for council is sort of, what is the general consensus when it comes to thinking about landlords and investors and anybody that owns property in the city, and sort of, do you want people to own property, and who do you want to own it? I really appreciated Jake's perspective when at council he said that, with the mill and the situation there, he thinks that we need to be open to investors and presenting an environment that allows, for better flexibility for them. And again, whether from an accounting perspective, I understand the 2 installments, but just I remember the days when my husband and I could barely not make the April payment. So
I think, Tim, we're still talking about 3 installments, right? But
No, it would just be 2 installments.
I thought you said there'd be 2 installments here, then we pass it on to the Wood County, and they can make an installment there.
No, currently we have a January 31st installment, April 30th installment, and a July 31st installment. If we went to 2 installments, it would be January 31st and July 31st. So basically, I guess the best way to put it is like if you had a $1,000 tax bill, to make it the math simple, under our current 3 installments, you'd have $333 due in January, $333 due in April, and $334 due in July. Under 2 installments is you would come up to City Hall and make a $500 payment on January 31st, and then the county would collect the $500 July 31st installment. And like I said, I just want to make it very clear to people that this would not be for this year at all. This is I'm just trying to gauge if there's any interest in doing this before, I kind of start putting the analysis together and the numbers together to lay it out. So, this would, at the earliest, this would affect the following next year at the very earliest. It would not be for the tax bills that are be going out in December of this year. I just want to make that clear.
I guess before we vote, I guess I would like to have it 3, just because of the circumstances that is, the mill, landlords talking about the landlords and others, that the more we could spread it out, it'd be advantageous for them. I'm thinking that might be advantageous. So I don't know if anybody else has a comment or.
I guess the way I see this is you're going to miss that middle payment. It's going to give you an extra 3 months. Is that right? I mean, it'll be 6 months between payments instead of 3 months.
Yeah.
Is that?
You have to pay the first amount is 500. So when, with all the properties. Sorry, so with the properties that my husband and I have, when we were first making our first payments at the end of January, and sometimes, your rentals, if they sit vacant starting in September or October, they're vacant for November and December and January, because it takes a little bit for you to get tenants interested again. So for some reason, it just seemed like, that first payment, when you're making it, it's like sometimes you can barely make it, and then the next, you can barely make it. So again, when it's 500 instead of 333, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have multiple properties, all of a sudden it adds up, and in my case, when you have 6 kids, it does make a difference. I don't want to be opposed to everything here, but I think my question is for council is, what is the general consensus in terms of, if we're looking for a grant to try and help with the mill, what are we thinking for properties? Putting more restriction, making it harder to invest, or making it easier?
I guess my question is so what you're saying is you would rather have those 3 payments
Yes.
than that extra 3 months to make that extra $100 and
Yes.
$200 payment?
Yep. We need that January payment to be less, so that then again in April and then again in July.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the 3 payments myself. I've spread out any bills that I can.
So this isn't an action item. I think it's.
Absolutely not.
No, it's
I'm just
just
trying to, what I'm really doing is just trying to gauge what the interest in the council would be to doing this. And if the council and, the constituents are like the 3 payments, I'm fine with that. Before I put time and effort into doing an analysis of the cost benefit, the investment earnings, the cost of collection, and then, obviously the views from, people that actually have to pay the taxes, I just wanted to kind of just gauge, and kind of what I'm forgetting, what I'm kind of sensing is that, there is a preference for the 3 installments,
Yeah.
and I'm fine with keeping that. I just
Unless you
brought it
make
up for
4.
discussion.
About monthly.
So are you looking, do we need to take action? Do you want us to take action on the first part of this for your collections this year? How you're collecting?
If you want, I mean, I'm just, it's more of a notification that that's my plan for that, but if you want to, we can take action that, the first installment will be, that the treasurer's office will be closed to in-person tax collection, and we'll provide, and we'll add that, that drop box outside.
I don't have a problem taking action on this, or is this just something that we,
Well, we could take action.
Actually, probably just, add a little bit,
So the motion would be to install a drop box in the lobby?
I guess the motion would be that for the first installment of taxes in 2021, that there will be no in-person tax collection, that either they can be mailed in or dropped off at City Hall in the lobby.
Okay, I would make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second it. With the understanding that if you're going to do this, hopefully by then we're through some of this, but
Yeah.
if we do this, have to do this again for the April payment, you'll bring this back again?
Absolutely.
I'll second.
Okay. There's a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Right.
Those opposed? No nays. So it's 3 ayes and no nay. Okay, next review the 2021 budget.
I guess I get to speak again. Okay, I don't know if everyone had a chance to review the materials that I kind of emailed the past couple days as we're trying to kind of, bring, package up the budget and get it in balance. Obviously, a couple days ago, I sent out the capital outlay, and basically that was just to kind of give the council an idea, of what items were included in those capital outlays and how they're being funded. I think some of the major items, one of the major items was the Routes to Recovery grant outlay. That's where with some further guidance from the U.S. Treasury and the Wisconsin Department of Administration, you're informed that the regular protective services wages would be eligible for that grant program. If you recall, back in, I think it was June or July, the city got allocated $304,000 for the Routes to Recovery, but the guidance on how you could use those funds was very mixed, to say the least. Guidance was changing on a monthly basis, and we had, obviously submitted some expenditures for sanitation. I know at the library for extra janitorial services to sanitize there. We'd also, obviously, you see throughout City Hall, we installed plexiglass on the departments, and those were all eligible. But that only accounted for like $27,000. I was part of a Zoom meeting with the Department of Administration on the Routes to Recovery and found out that the Treasury had basically said that it's presumed that protective services were substantially designated to deal with the COVID pandemic outbreak, public health crisis, and thus they would be eligible. So my plan is that going back, and they're eligible going back to March 1st, is that we're going to submit one police officer's time, one firefighter, paramedic daily time that was, we're going to say they're substantially dedicated to that, and we're going to submit those wages as fringe benefits, which will use up that allocation. So it's actually good news. And then basically the plan for the use of those funds is to, under the Routes to Recovery grant outlay, is that if you remember as part of the fire department budget presentation, they say they're in dire need of new radios that they've been applying for in the past number of years through FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant, a grant to fund the replacement of those radios. They were unsuccessful. So we're proposing in the budget to apply that grant funding, since the wages that we had that are being reimbursed were already budgeted for and paid for. We're going to capture those funds, hopefully, and use those to purchase those radios. Also for the fire department, they did not specifically put it in their 20 and 21 outlay budget, but new in-squad cameras that are the same as the body cameras, so Axon, so that we have one, because presently right now we have Axon body cameras, but the in-squad cameras are a different brand. They're in need of a replacement, so we would purchase those with those funds. So that was the big thing in the outlay.
Sounds good to me, so.
So I had that. Now on to, obviously right now, we have a budget deficit of $118,000. And I had laid out some of the options on the revenue side to balance the budget. Obviously, on the expenditure side, you obviously can, by looking at specific expenditures and reducing those, can obviously help to close that gap. But you always have to remember that, whatever expenditure you pick, it all depends on what the funding source of that expenditure is, because not all expenditures are funded by the tax levies. There's other sources that are used to fund those. So depending on which expenditure you might want to reduce to close that gap, it all depends on exactly what the funding source for that is. So I laid those out. And my plan is that for Tuesday's meeting, the 10th, is when we'll kind of go through all these options and really, because we have the public hearing on the 12th, if everyone remembers that. So Thursday, November 12th, for all the public out there, that we have a public hearing on the 2021 budget. So on the 10th, we go through these, and then obviously I'd update on any information between now and then. Also, we have some with the municipal building improvement. You saw that also in the capital outlay. We have some decisions there to make. That we have about $104,000 of carryover funds in the municipal building improvement outlay, and we have some requests, obviously, the three main being the city garage is interested in requesting a building, a vehicle storage building, because right now we have some of our equipment sitting outdoors and it's not protected. So they estimate about a $200,000 vehicle storage building at the city garage. Obviously, from last week, Andy Barnett from the library discussed about elevator rebuild at the library of $80,999. And obviously, the big ticket item is the Fire Station 1 and 2 remodel that we've discussed at previous meetings that we have to have a discussion on and make a decision on, which option we want to go with that. So those are kind of some of the items that for the Tuesday that we'll sort through. Yes, and also, along with, obviously, with the fire station is that I'm pretty much done with, pretty close to coming up with, projecting out what our debt would be, debt service in the next couple of years would be under various borrowing options.
Any other questions? So our next meeting goes back to the agenda item number 8. Our next meeting would be on the 10th, next week, Tuesday, at 4:30. Jamie? Can I speak? Sure.
So are we on just like the final wrap-up part, or do you have to do something on?
We're wrapping up and I'll be adjourning in a minute.
Okay. So I appreciate you letting me speak again, and I just want to speak to a couple of things that I've heard. Jay, you had mentioned when we had spoke out on the Rosewood area that you were interested in bringing open communication and getting better with communication. And one of the things that happened is that this meeting, it took a long time, first of all, to figure out when the meeting was. And when I finally got the notice and the information, I was told that Steve Koth and Thaddeus Kubitschek would be the two, in addition to Scott Kellogg, contacts. So everyone that I've been encouraging to talk to isn't here, other than Scott. So now, something was passed tonight that I'm not sure that the people that I told to communicate, I have no idea what's been communicated. And so all of a sudden, I definitely do not think that that was clear communication. And so we have a finance meeting where we pass the Waterworks and Lighting ordinance, or finance committee where it goes to council. And council, when they had originally discussed it, said, send it back to committee and let's see if we can work something out. Like, we really want to work something out. And I got the impression that from all the council members that, yes, this needs to be worked out. And instead, it goes back to finance. It's different people on the committee than were on the sheet that said they were going to be there. So we contacted the wrong people. And at this point, is it going to improve? Or should we expect this level of communication going forward?
It's been approved.
I understand that that specific piece has been approved. What I'm saying is that the communication, although I got the email, although I'm on the list now to be notified when things happen, I was notified that the wrong people to talk to.
You weren't I understand your frustration,
Okay?
but you weren't informed, certain circumstances came up with the other two people,
Absolutely.
and
Yep.
so they couldn't attend.
Absolutely.
And so, Mr. Benjamin and Jay and so forth.
Since
were
there
asked to
was,
do.
I'm hoping, a lot of people that were interested in this, wouldn't it have made sense to table it, or wouldn't it have made sense to communicate to people? I mean, I guess, Jay, what I'm asking is, what is your level of expectation? When you had that conversation with me and you said things need to change, we need to be better at communicating, that's not what I've experienced so far.
I don't disagree with you that we do, I think we can improve our communications, but you're going to have this, regardless, this is going to come back to us regardless of who's sitting here tonight. I understand that you probably didn't get an opportunity to call, the people over here, but there's nothing saying that the council can't send this back again. And this isn't necessarily done just because it's going back to council.
I understand that council can, do something different. I just would like to make it known that there isn't clear communication right now, and there isn't, from my perspective. I thought that the 3 people that were on the sheet were the 3 people that need to be communicated with. 2 of those 3 weren't here, and so I'm not sure that Jay received any of the communication that went to either Thaddeus or Scott. Or Steve Koth.
I did not get anything before I got here tonight.
Yeah.
I got the letter that you passed out to
Yeah.
Scott. That was all I have. But
Yeah, so,
feel free to send it. We have a meeting in a couple weeks again, and
yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, motion to adjourn and seconded, so we're adjourning at 5:48.